Lindsey, so good to see you. Welcome to Pop Alternative.
Thank you. So nice to see you. Thanks for taking the time.
I mean, spooky season is right around the corner. I mean, this is
We're kicking it off. We're doing it. It's here.
we
Favorite
are
time.
doing it. I mean, I'm ready to kind of watch horror movies over and over again. I don't know about you, but that's like what I do in October.
Let's hear it. First, I have to watch this one over and over again at the mini screenings, and then I'll get to all the other great ones too.
I had a great time. Congratulations with this film. Seriously. Here's the thing that I want to kind of talk to you about generally until we get into kind of Bloodline specifically. But I mean, like I said, it's a huge time right now with spooky season. People are going to be watching horror movies, but I feel like in the last kind of 5-10 years, there's been this big surge of popularity with horror movies. The horror movie fans kind of have an appetite for all this content. So what's that like kind of working on a horror movie at a time where there is this big kind of appetite? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, it's really, really rewarding because, we are in this time when studios and audiences are celebrating more elevated versions of horror content. So to be able to tell a horror story from an elevated point of view and really come at it, as a filmmaker who really, I just really wanted to throw everything in the filmmaker's arsenal at this movie and have scares not just from jump scares, but from cinematography and from sound design and from everything you don't see as much as you do see, and to have that freedom because we are in that time of kind of the art of the horror film. It's been awesome.
I mean, the movie has everything you said it does. Absolutely. Like it does, because that was my next question. I mean, like people are scary, right? Like you don't need the gore and the jump scares, but you do have it in Pet Sematary Bloodlines. You pop that in there.
I do. You got to give the people what they want, but also, my what I said in my first meeting with Paramount on this project was this is character-driven horror, and Pet
Yeah.
Sematary has always been character-driven horror, but it should be all the scarier because you care about these people and you don't want them to die.
What's the mindset getting to kind of dive into this world, this universe that people are familiar with, but at the same time, people aren't familiar with, right? Like people know the Pet Cemetery movies and everything. They know the novel, the prequels and everything, but they don't know this movie. Like, is it kind of a unique situation from a storytelling perspective, diving into Pet Cemetary's Bloodlines?
It's a very unique situation, and honestly, the kind of situation that's like I really, really enjoy this kind of stuff. It's the perfect balance for me of being able to honor and play with material that I've loved since childhood, but also really put my own spin on it. And so I was just constantly rereading the book and looking for anything from it that I could pull from it as kind of pillars. And the two of those pillars for me as kind of north stars, where there was a line at the end of the book that says that Judd is the guardian of the woods, which suggests some kind of mantle that is never explored in any of the films. And we see him kind of mysteriously drinking and smoking on the porch as an older man, but we don't know that there's anything more behind that, right?
Yeah.
And and the other thing was the chapter about Timmy Baterman, which says in the book that Judd's encounter with Timmy and trying to like kill Timmy is actually why the evil targets Judd his whole life. And that's also never explained in any of the movies. So I just felt like there was this story and this explanation that hadn't been told. Also, Ludlow in the book is just such a rich character and so beautifully drawn by Stephen King. And I felt like we hadn't really seen a movie that was a where Ludlow felt like its own character. And so I wanted to make this as much of a Ludlow origin story as it is a Judd origin story.
100%. And to kind of add to that, it's interesting you say that about the characters and the book and then putting it on screen. I mean, one of the things that really kind of stood out to this is, I mean, this is a credit to your incredible cast for this movie, Lindsey, is the facial expressions and emotions on all these characters. It's the characters that are kind of maybe possessed or taken over by these evil spirits, and the ones that aren't, that are kind of battling and figuring everything out. The facial expressions. And there's a lot of moments in this movie where like characters aren't really saying anything, but
Yeah.
they're saying a lot with like how they look, the facial expressions. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, no, exactly. And so many of those beats are written into the script and things that are so important in terms of it's just about as much as what you don't say as what you do say. And there's a lot of moments of silence in this film, and that's something I wanted to lean into, just in terms of the themes of like the silence of death. And since Pet Sematary is all about our confrontation of death and our mortality.
Absolutely. And kind of a more specific question. I mean, whether you're a director, writer, actor, musician, dancer, it's storytelling. So Lindsey Anderson Beer is a storyteller. What excites you about being a storyteller specifically?
That's such a good question. I've always loved storytelling. I was, that kid who would turn in movies instead of essays at school, and I and my teacher's like, I don't know, this isn't what I asked for. I don't know what to do with this. There's just something about exploring the human condition and saying something real about life and observation that I love. I mean, I'm also obsessed with photography, which is its own form of storytelling, but there's just something about observing the beauty and the heartbreak and the tragedy of life that I think is so important to really processing why we're here and what life is about.
Absolutely. You've worked on comedies as well. And I feel like comedies really hit hard, because I feel like I watch comedies now, especially during the pandemic, where I was doing 3 years of self-reflection and figuring things out. I always look at comedy more and more with like a serious undertone, like the serious lens, right? Did you always kind of look at comedy in that lens a little bit, with like the serious undertones and like those kind of important issues? Like, because it was always there, but I start thinking about it a little bit more now, I feel like.
Yeah, definitely. For me, anytime, even if I'm writing a comedy, the spine of it is a drama, and then I figure out how to pepper in the comedy. And comedy, at least in my life, I feel like is mostly used as a coping mechanism. And so, and in a way, is very much like horror in terms of an interesting way to just digest the hardest parts of life.
Speaking of movies that aren't a comedy, Pet Sematary, Bloodlines.
Yeah, not so much a comedy. A couple of comedy.
Yeah. I did like the hockey getting thrown in there a little bit, by the way. I played hockey my whole life. Just saying. That was a nice little thing. I was like, oh, snap. Like that was pretty awesome. Yeah, no, I can't wait for people to see it. Pet Sematary Bloodline streaming on Paramount Plus October 6th. Lindsey, so great chatting with you. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Take care. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.